Hi, this is Anthony, parent of IRS Medic. And, the United States is a complicated sort of thing. And, we are the United States, but the United States isn't just the states. The states have possessions, they have territories. So, what's the status of that? If you're born there, if you move there, what's your tax consequences? What happens? Let's say this. Let's say that you're a New York person, you live in New York, and then you decide you're a U.S. citizen, you move to another place where there's other U.S. citizens all around you. You move to Puerto Rico. If you move there, would you still be entitled to something that you would be entitled to in New York, like, say, welfare benefits? Or would you moving to Puerto Rico remove your right to something? Is that even possible? Would the courts look to sue you for money that they mistakenly paid to you, they believe, while you moved to Puerto Rico? What would happen? Now, John, joining me today is John Richardson and Keith Redmond, and I want to start this question off for John Richardson. Do you think any situation like that is possible? That the complications between territory and citizenship creates a sort of an unequal kind of citizenship for people? And do you think that the government could ever do something like that?
Oh, Anthony, not only is it possible, but it's been demonstrated to be absolutely true. About 6 months ago, the Supreme Court of the United States basically upheld the right of Congress to deny an individual benefits that he was receiving while he was living in New York State just because he moved to Puerto Rico. And to make the point for good measure, the government sued him for a refund for the $27,000 they had paid him to try to get that back. So the bottom line and the rationale for the decision is a very, very simple one. The people who live in the territories do not presumptively have any or the same constitutional rights as people living in, we'll call it the mainland, the main 50 states, etc. So there is no question that people who live in the territories, as a general principle, whether it's taxation or anything else, are allowed to be treated differently under the U.S. Constitution. And I don't want to go too far, but this has its roots in a series of cases called the Insular cases, which were decided after the Spanish-American War in the early 1900s.
Okay. And there was a lot of things going on there. There was a lot of expansion going on. And the Spanish-American War, man, there's one. If there was a false flag, I think the U.S. Maine would be one that led the whole country in there. And when you know it, the United States flexes its muscles and gets a whole bunch of things, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. That is, the United States invaded all these countries and then took them over. And then, I guess the thing is it really unreasonable to believe that the United States would still act unfairly to the territories it invaded to take? That's sort of, it makes a lot of sense in that point. Well, now let's talk about some other ones. Now, Puerto Rico is really confusing. Puerto Rico is incredibly confusing to understand because if you're a U.S. person and you move to Puerto Rico, all of your Puerto Rican income is no longer subject to U.S. taxation. But if you live in the U.S. and you have income from Puerto Rico, it goes to the U.S. But now what happens, and this gets a lot of people by surprise, they're Puerto Rican residents, and they have income from Puerto Rico and maybe a few other neighboring islands. And that means they also have to file a 1040 non-resident. They're filing a 1040 non-resident return, even though they are a resident of a United States jurisdiction that confers citizenship upon them.
Whoa, Anthony, this is getting so complicated, nobody will even understand what we're talking about. So basically, let's move to the next step here, right?
Okay.
So the territories are treated differently, and that includes matters of taxation. Now, at the risk of oversimplification, all right, and as you know, nothing is always as simple as it sounds, but at the risk of oversimplification, you look at section of the tax code starting with section 931. Maybe you want to pull up the other tweet that I sent you.
Okay. Yeah. Let me get that one. I started with that one. Here. Yeah. Okay. And I have the IRS web page.
Link. I gave you a second link, I think, right?
Do you want the Puerto Rico one or the Samoa one?
The latter. the American Samoa one.
Okay, here it is. It's up. Yep, I got that up right now.
Okay. All right. And maybe expand that so we can see, all the replies, et cetera. But
okay,
basically, look, here's the bottom line. Okay. Bottom line, okay, we know that we know that individuals defined as U.S. residents or citizens are defined on their worldwide income. However, if a U.S. resident or citizen lives in one of the territories, okay, specifically, we're looking at American Samoa here as one of the examples. Basically, that American citizen or resident is not subject to taxation on income sourced in that territory. Okay, so in other words, we have U.S. Citizenship worldwide taxation for citizens and residents unless they're receiving income from American Samoa or a territory and they meet the residency test to be a bona fide resident of that territory. Okay, so bottom line, and this is the sort of the foundation of why people move to Puerto Rico, et cetera. Okay, or part of the reason that if an American citizen or resident moves to one of the territories, let's keep American Samoa in front of us, that American or citizen is not taxable, all right, on income sourced in American Samoa. Now, I would invite you to click on, pull up a little bit, up, other way. Click on up, the tweet, which shows in section 931 of the Internal Revenue Code.
Okay.
Right there, click there.
Yep.
This is what it actually says, okay? Because, some people might think I'm making this up. Income from sources within Guam, American Samoa, these islands, in the case of an individual who is a bona fide resident of a specified possession, and that would include American Samoa, right? During the entire taxable year, gross income shall not include income from sources within any specified possession. All right. And of course, we have the usual sourcing rules, et cetera, but I don't want to complicate this too much. The bottom line is that an American citizen or resident can move to American Samoa, get all of their income from sources within American Samoa, and have that income excluded from U.S. taxation. Okay? Now, some people might think, well, that's entirely unremarkable because after all, they're not living in the United States, they're living in a U.S. territory. Why should they pay tax on income sourced outside the United States? Well, it's kind of interesting because you said take that American citizen or resident and they move to a country like, say, France, and all of a sudden, now bear in mind, American Samoa is a U.S. territory. France, I think, is a sovereign country, isn't it?
I believe so.
I think so. But yet, the American citizen or resident who moves to another sovereign country is taxable on income sourced in that sovereign country, France. But if they move to a U.S. territory like American Samoa, income sourced in American Samoa is excluded from their tax base. Doesn't that seem a little bit odd to you?
It does. And I have a question to you, gentlemen, just another take on this. So let's say somebody is born in American Samoa. They are considered a U.S. national, not a U.S. citizen. So if that U.S. national born in American Samoa moves to France, are they considered where they would have to file a U.S. tax declaration every year? Or are they exempt from it being a U.S. national?
Well, I think Keith, let's go through this. What does the Internal Revenue Code say? Remember, the Internal Revenue Code is the Constitution of the United States. All right,
Correct.
basically.
Correct.
What it says is you're an individual, you're subject to taxation on your worldwide income, but the Treasury regulation defines individual as a resident or a citizen. So let's go through it, Keith. Is somebody born in American Samoa a U.S. citizen? Yes or no?
No.
They're
a U.S. national.
Are they taxable on their worldwide income if they move to France?
No.
There you go. So I think what we can conclude from this is the gold standard is to try to be born in American Samoa so you don't have U.S. citizenship, right? You're a U.S. national.
Right.
But look, I don't want to get this overly technical. I think what's important to focus on here is the absolute insanity and unfairness of a U.S. citizen or resident, taxable on income sourced in another country when they're a bona fide resident of that other country, but not taxable on income when they're a bona fide source in a territory when they're a bona fide resident of that territory. Doesn't that seem insane to you?
Yes.
Yes. Here's the thing. That what does it mean to be a U.S. national and not a citizen? What's that? And how do I become one?
Well, it means that you have the right to live in the United States, for example. Right now, bear in mind, if the American Samoan decides they want to move to the United States, then they become a U.S. tax resident, by meeting the substantial presence test and all that sort of stuff.
Right. And that makes sense.
Yeah. So, this whole thing is, it's really a joke. All right. Who's taxable on what, where? Maybe the whole rationale of the thing is this, that the territories are already under U.S. control, so why don't we cut people a break if they go there to live? But the rest of the world is not yet under U.S. control, so why don't we use U.S. citizens living in, say, France to attack the French economy or something like that, right? It's on a comparative basis, it's absolutely idiotic. Where do you think I'm wrong?
And I don't, no, and I really want to be a U.S. national. That's what I want to become.
You'd be much better off being a U.S. national.
It's because your vote doesn't matter here. Who cares? And even if you voted for the people you wanted got in, it doesn't matter. Everyone ignores the law. There's no benefit really to being a citizen as opposed to just being able to live someplace. No one can come here and grab me and throw me out and deport me out of the country. That's the kind of one benefit I get right now. But otherwise, I have a government that doesn't serve me. That's, basically declare that they're the enemy of me and an enemy of everybody. Now, some people recognize this, some people don't. But there's really no benefit to U.S. citizenship taxation. And it seems like being a national is what you want. That's what you want. Right. You're the most free person in the world.
Yeah, because you just don't have. I looked it up. You don't have voting rights in federal elections.
Great. And you're
a little bit limited in what public offices you can hold. That's one significant difference.
Okay, great. I love it. I love what I'm hearing so far. Now it's just a little too late for me, though.
It is too late for you, Anthony.
I'm about 51 years too late. Is that right?
So here's basically what the gold standard would be. All right. What you want to do is, say somebody, a green card holder, for example, who moves to the United States, right? What they should do is have their child born in American Samoa.
Absolutely.
All right, because there's no possibility of transmitting U.S. citizenship, right? And you've given the kid all the freedom of being in the United States without the tax problem unless they move there. They are free. They're totally free to move around the world, right?
Right.
So, I think that this is an interesting, topic, I think, for green card holders and family planning. If you move to the United States and you expect to have children, all right, try to have them born in American Samoa.
Yeah. Well, maybe American Samoa has a tourist industry, kind of that they're untapped.
Well, it can become a birth tourist industry.
Right.
I think it's far better than having your child born in the United States.
Absolutely,
it's incredible.
No, and I just want to clarify. I think I know the answer to this. Is that this doesn't apply if you are a citizen of Puerto Rico, because Puerto Ricans are born with U.S. citizenship. Is that correct?
That is correct. American Samoa
they are
is the only territory, as far as I know.
Well, I think there's another.
It's not, my total area of expertise, but my understanding is that American Samoa is the only U.S. territory where if you're born there, you don't automatically have U.S. citizenship, and that's why it's literally the gold standard in places to be born.
Right. Swains Island is the only other one, aside from American Samoa, that has the same criteria as a U.S. national.
Swains Island, where's that? Is that nearby? Nearby Samoa. Nearby.
You're testing my geographical.
All right, I'll have to look that one up there. Maybe somebody can comment to say where Swains Island.
Yeah.
The real value of it is, it's not so much the American Samoa connection. It's the value is that if I'm right in this, that you could you could travel the world on a U.S. passport, live all around the world, and not be subject to the U.S. extraterritorial regime. You can be a partner of a local business. You'd have all these freedoms that American citizens simply don't have.
Wayne's Island is in the South Pacific, just as an FYI.
And now, and I'm on the page for the IRS, and I guess, and this is just what I want to clarify, because your tweet was mentioning, I think it had something about Guam. Oh yeah. Okay, so let me get this up on the screen again. So just to clarify that, why, making sure that we have the right thing here, and okay, so when I'm looking at your tweet here, John, if you can see that 26 U.S. Code 931, it says income from sources within Guam, American Samoa, or the Northern Mariana Islands. This applies for all of them: Guam, American Samoa, and Northern Mariana Islands, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just so that's where it's excluded. Now, you said American Samoa. Does that include all of them, or is it Guam, American Samoa, and Northern Mariana Islands? That's just what I want to clarify.
Well, that section applies to all three.
Okay, just want to make sure. So it's not.
But hold on. Let's keep this in context, okay? So we're talking about two different things at once.
Okay.
I want to distinguish, the issue of somebody born in American Samoa.
Oh, okay. I see what you're talking about. Okay, right. Yeah.
Let's distinguish that from, say, somebody like who do I know in the U.S.? I know a guy named Anthony Perrant. Okay, who's a U.S. citizen now. So Anthony, because he's a U.S. citizen, is subject to taxation on everything he has anywhere he lives. But if Anthony were to become a bona fide resident of American Samoa, right, then, and it includes for an entire in other words, you meet the requirements of this section of the Internal Revenue Code, then Anthony would have a same country exemption for income sourced in American Samoa, right? But Anthony would still be taxable, on the rest of his income. Now, Keith's point is that for people that's because Anthony's a U.S. citizen, but Keith's point is for people who are born in American Samoa or not U.S. citizens, they can move to France, and because they're not a U.S. citizen, they're not going to be subject to the Internal Revenue Code, right? Now, one other point I want to make on this that I find personally interesting is this: that the test for bona fide residence is 183 days in a presence in American Samoa during the year. 183 days. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a tweet. You can't click on it. Okay, but it's 183 days. Now, we can make this a separate podcast, but what I find interesting is the number of different tests for residence, right, that are used in different parts of the Internal Revenue Code, right? So here we have a 183-day test, which is sort of the international standard. The substantial presence test for the U.S. tax residency is, of course, not 183 days. If we look at the 9/11 foreign earned income exclusion, right, the physical presence test is, I think, 330 days or something like that outside the United States. So it's kind of interesting that they use a whole pile of different tests as statutory indicators of residency throughout the Internal Revenue Code, and I think that's rather odd. I think it's rather odd.
And so I think I see where I confused the issue there. And so essentially, yeah, as me in Connecticut, I can move to Guam, American Samoa, and Northern Marianas Islands, and as long as I'm a bona fide resident and all of my income is from that one of those.
Well, all of that.
Wait a second, but you know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say
you're living in. It
doesn't say. Wait a second. It doesn't. It says income derived from sources within any specified possession. Well, if I'm living in Guam and my income comes from Guam, American Samoa, and Northern Marianas Islands.
I think you may very well be right on that, Anthony. You may very well be right. So, I mean, it's even better than we thought. There is, by the way, also a requirement that, of course, you know the definition of tax home for the foreign earned income exclusion. You can't have a tax home in the United States. In other words, the bottom line is, in order to do this, you have to actually pick up and move, sever ties, etc. But I think it's interesting. Now, of course, the question one would ask is, you've heard the expression "out of the frying pan and into the fire." The question you would ask is, well, how exactly does American Samoa tax that income, right? Could it be worse? That I don't know the answer to.
We don't know that
particularly, but I will tell you this: that anybody listening to this is probably aware that moving to Puerto Rico, right, is a huge, huge industry and planning for that. And the reason is the same principle, right? That income sourced in Puerto Rico, provided you meet the other requirements, is not subject to taxation, all right, if you live there. But the reason this took off in Puerto Rico is because under their domestic tax legislation, they put together a really sweet deal to attract people to Puerto Rico. So this is a great thing as long as the domestic tax situation in the territories is not too bad.
Which we haven't looked into, but I can't.
Well, I don't know.
It's just hard to imagine anything worse.
Worse, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is that we're ruled over by people we can't even see. We don't even know where these people. Washington D.C. and then there's centers all around the world. We don't even know who is doing this, and everyone's pointing the finger at everybody else, right? So, but on a small island, it's small.
Anthony, you could set up your own government in a small island. I mean, I really want to consider this. Okay,
oh my goodness. I mean, now look, we, and I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Fortress IRS medic.
I love it. This, as we think about it, and this is sort of what drives you nuts as you go through so many of these things. You're like, man, this is a clear equal protection case. You're creating two different classes of citizens. You're creating ones you're calling citizens, and you're calling these other ones nationals.
But Anthony, that's the point. That's the precise point of the insular cases. There's a series of them in the early 1900s. The purpose of the insular cases is to make it clear that residents of the territories do not have either constitutional rights at all or the same constitutional rights. I mean, that's the whole point. It is blatant discrimination. Now, in the recent Puerto Rico case, I can't remember the name of it, but Justice Gorsuch, a very energetic, intelligent, I think, probably going to go down in history as one of the great Supreme Court judges. But what he actually says in an opinion was, he wrote a separate opinion saying, this majority decision allowing this is based on these insular cases that I'm paraphrasing, that are completely idiotic, have no place in U.S. law. And if anybody even asked me to overrule them, I would have. But since nobody asked me to overrule them, I guess we'll just let it stand. In other words, it's a clear invitation for the next litigant to basically say, it's time for these insular cases to be overruled. I think what's important for Americans abroad to focus on is this, all right? So a U.S. citizen green card holder, if you move to a U.S. territory, right, that's owned by the U.S., you're going to get essentially, if you do other things properly, let's call it a same country exemption on that income from U.S. taxation, a same country exemption, okay? However, if you move to a country that's not a U.S. territory, that's a sovereign country, and you have bona fide residence there, and you earn income sourced in that country, you're fully taxable on that country by the United States. Now, I would think that would really bother Americans abroad who are suffering under this extraterritorial tax regime. And the reason I use same country exemption is because what are all these Americans abroad groups clamoring for under FATCA? Same country
exemption.
Shouldn't they argue that, well, the same country exemption should be expanded to taxation of income as well, and say, come on, how come the people who live in a U.S. territory get a same country exemption with respect to the taxation of income sourced in that territory? And here I am in the sovereign country of France, and I don't get that same country exemption. I think that's a question worth asking, don't you? What do you think, Keith, Anthony?
Absolutely. I would be up in arms.
Well, I mean, I
You would
think
think.
if right, I would be interested maybe in, basically after listening to you, John, if I was someone affected by this and had and it lived here, I would be interested in suing the government, perhaps. And with this, and kind of with what you just said, you're saying, well, Gorsuch is kind of waiting for someone to come along and just ask for this. So
Well,
it seems like,
he's
well, here's my
waiting for
question.
the insular cases to be overruled. Now, if the insular cases are overruled, that simply
That
means
doesn't
that
necessarily help us.
that wouldn't help us. Okay,
Now, and that's the
that's a
problem.
separate issue.
Right. I don't want everyone to be treated equally as a U.S. citizen. I want us to be treated equally as a national of Marianas Islands. That's what I want. So they could always, hey, yeah, we'll treat you equally. You don't necessarily win. So that's where I'm like, I don't know about this.
Anthony, I think the most important question is, after having had this discussion today, are you going to move to a territory and set up Fortress IRS?
Well, maybe. How about that? Maybe. And what it depends on is what kind of level of support we get from this video. So I want to know. I want to know from our viewers: should we set up, a tax fortress in the Northern Marianas Islands or American Samoa, for people to come and give birth? A beautiful. I mean, I imagine a beautiful facility. I mean, it's got to be pretty nice there. I mean, it gets hot, but I assume it's got to be pretty nice. Not a bad place.
I've seen photos. It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, but I hope maybe we have someone watching this from American Samoa and would like to be a guest and say, Anthony, I think it's great. I want you to open shop right down the street from me. Here it is. And so I would invite anyone from American Samoa.
Why don't you get in touch with the government of American Samoa and see if they would extend a permanent tax break to IRS medic?
I think so, yeah.
On the grounds of sort of encouraging birth tourism in American Samoa. And for green card holders out there,
yeah,
remember, the gold standard would be to have your children born in American Samoa.
There it is. This is an incredible episode, guys. Thank you, John. Once again, you are, as I tell we restarted this podcast in June, and I have been learning more and more and more, and it gets a little, and I thought I knew a lot. I thought I did, and maybe I did. But as you dig deeper and go through the details, it gets more and more creepy is the word. And it gets more and more obvious what this is. That
Anthony, at the end of the day, we're all nothing but students of the unfairness of the extraterritorial applicability of U.S. laws. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Oh my God, incredible episode today, guys. I had no idea this was coming. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. Anyway, so thank you so much, John and Keith, for this today. And any call to action, Keith, you have for people who are kind of concerned about this?
Oh, good question. I think they need to geez, you put me on the spot here.
I did.
There needs to be a call to action. I guess the first thing
and I guess
is
what, we don't even know what our call to action is. We got to figure out call to action out.
The call to action for Americans abroad should be, remember American Samoa.
Right.
And actually, what? You're actually, what, John? I think
ask their senator, ask your senator and congressman.
Well,
why
I think
this is the way it is.
The first thing is education. That's the first thing. And so spreading the word, I think, is probably the call to action.
Yeah, because not many people know about this.
You don't even know. So what's the point of arguing something? People are like, what are you talking? What's American Samoa?
Right. Yeah, very true.
So I think our first step is to educate the public, to say, look at how great it is if you were born in Northern Marianas Islands. And isn't that much better than everything else of being a U.S. citizenship? And I think
it's a better class of being a U.S. person.
It's a higher class of U.S. person. No, I would trade it for a second. I would trade my right to vote in federal elections, which don't matter anyway, so that I am not treated as a subject of the U.S., which is how we all. And I think that's what's becoming very clear. We're not citizens. We are their subjects. And that's why being a national is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and join us next week. I'm not sure what we're going to cover next, but we are getting deeper and deeper into this. And again, I thank you for joining us, and please leave your comments below. This is Anthony Parent for Keith Redmond and John Richardson. Thanks again for watching.